and welcome to Indie Book Magic, a podcast that connects geek readers and writers in an open, lighthearted, and occasionally random environment. We're your friendly hosts, Janina Polito and
H.L. Burke. This week we're having our very special either or episode, and we're going to be comparing some apples to oranges kind of things, and hopefully some oranges to oranges kind of thing, just to make things a little less confusing.
So what kind of oranges? Like red oranges, blue oranges, purple oranges?
Green oranges.
Kind of an Easter spirit here, so I keep thinking of maybe dying oranges or something. I don't know.
I want to try that now. I've never dyed oranges. Is that? I hope that's not that probably is a thing somewhere. But anyway, we've sent out a call on our social media to get your takes on what you would like us to talk about things you would like us to compare and contrast. And we got some very interesting things, and we're going to try to touch on all of your requests. I wish we could acknowledge everybody who has requested personally and give their names and stuff, but we have proven in the past that we are not reliable to pronounce names correctly.
That is not one of our gifts. We fail these things sometimes.
So rather than slaughter some people's poor innocent names, we are just going to give the questions, and then we're going to give our answers.
And so if it comes across your question, you can feel free to do like a quiet, celebratory victory dance that we chose your awesome question, and you are an incredibly important and significant person in the universe.
Yes, so it's so important.
So important. All right, our first question is, write with music playing or write with silence? This is coupled with a similar question that was write in quiet versus surrounded by noise.
Yes. Now, I have had different answers of this throughout my life. I tend to not have quiet be an option with my life, honestly. I've got so much in my household going on between the pets and the kids that it's not like I can just shut myself in a room most of the time and just have quiet. I have to manufacture it. So usually it's headphones with something going on for me. Otherwise, there's just too many distractions.
That makes sense. I have to say, usually I have a similar thing, but that's partly because I like to write on the couch sometimes next to my husband, and my husband likes to video game and watch TV shows. And if I am really nice about it and everything and such, he will quietly, he'll mute his video games or he'll watch a TV show on his computer or something like that. But I've just learned over the years to adapt to the need for TV in the house. And I do find that when I'm by myself, though, especially if I'm really in the middle of a scene, I will either listen to the same song over and over and over and over and over again, or I will get so into the characters' voices and everything that it'll be completely silent in the house and I'll have no idea because I'm just focused on writing it.
Nature sounds and stuff, especially if I'm writing in a certain environment and I just kind of want to get in my head into that space of being on a stormy night or a rainy evening or a jungle with weird birds calling out in the background. Also, I like epic music tracks and video game music. I can't write to anything with lyrics. It ends up it gets my brain starts listening to the lyrics and what did that say? What does that mean? And then I stop paying attention to what I'm writing. So I can't do lyrics, but I can do instrumental tracks and stuff. So.
Well, I'm the exact opposite. If I was listening to ambient stuff, I'm pretty sure I'd fall asleep. That comes back to I actually used to, as a kid, would play those on a little tape player by my bed. This is the 90s, so I had a little tape player on my bed. And I would play ambient soundtracks to go to sleep to. So now if I play that, I'm going to go to sleep. So now you listeners know how to put Janina Polito to sleep. Just play ambient sounds around me. But
it's such a useful skill, how to put out a Janine.
There we go. But I actually have to listen to music with lyrics when I'm writing. If I'm listening to just instrumental, I have synesthesia. So I see sound in my head as and outside of my head is shapes and movements and colors and everything. The more instrumental, really dynamic tracks are actually very distracting to me because there's so many things going on there that it's difficult for me to see the screen all the time. So I actually prefer very simple melody, lyric songs. That's probably one of the reasons I love pop songs, because a lot of times they can be pretty simplistic, or at least if they have lyrics and you're grounded in the words and you're not trying to look at what it looks like, which that makes more sense if you have synesthesia. But anyway, for me, it's easier to ignore the visuals with music if there's lyrics. But if there isn't lyrics, then I'll just spend there like staring at my screen going, oh, it's so pretty. And I haven't written for half an hour. So little quirky thing going on there.
I think this one comes down to preference a little bit. And somebody wanted to know if we prefer hot or iced coffee.
I like iced as a general rule. I'm not a huge coffee drinker personally, and I have to drink decaf because I'm so sensitive that decaf actually makes me awake. But if I do drink coffee, I like lattes. And if I do drink lattes, I like them to be iced with lots of caramel syrup and whipped cream and almond milk. And yes, I'm one of those people. So if you drink black coffee, you can feel free to disapprove me from wherever you are right now.
Yeah, I am a coffee drinker. I think this is well established on the internet lore of, I drink a lot of coffee. I do both though. We have a thing in my house called fridge coffee, which is a thing where if there's coffee left in the pot after we've gotten done having our morning coffee, we dump the coffee into a pitcher and put it in the fridge so that later we can have it cold. So hot coffee in the morning, cold coffee in the afternoon. Hot coffee in the winter, cold coffee in the summer, but since I live in San Diego, those are relative terms.
I was gonna say, yeah, is it ever really cold there?
It gets to 50 sometimes. It gets fall or spring cold. It doesn't really get winter cold.
Mm.
So, but yeah, that's the thing for me. I actually didn't drink coffee very much until I started working at a bank. I literally worked at a coffee shop for like a year and a half and barely drank coffee. But then I started working at a bank, and for some reason, finances did what being exposed to coffee every day could not. I needed something to keep me awake during all the numbers.
Oh, no. That makes complete sense. I completely agree with that. All right, let's see the next question. Fur versus scales. I'm not entirely sure what this is referring to, but we here at Indie Book Magic have the mascot of the cat dragon who has both.
He does.
So I think that is pretty much our general mantra in terms of fur versus scales. We like foxes, we like dragons, we like snakes, we like cats.
I have never had a scaly pet though. I've always wanted one, but I've only ever had furry pets. Or I had a short-term stint with some feathered pets, but that didn't last very long.
Is there a story there?
Oh no, finches are just kind of annoying.
Well, yeah, finches, yeah, and they're hard to tame too. Like it's not like you can go and cuddle a finch, you know.
No, I had 2 finches for a little bit, and then I had to move, and I gave them away to a cousin.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, what's next?
Star Trek versus Star Wars, and I don't know. This could be. Is this a controversial question?
Having grown up in both the Star Wars and the Star Trek fandom, I have seen other people treat it as a controversial question. But again, since I have grown up in both fandoms equally, I don't really have a preference. I like them.
I've seen people fight about this, but to me, it's not. I mean, I know that there's the whole Star Trek is more science-y and Star Wars is more fantasy, but it's like science versus fiction versus fantasy too. That's not something I ever felt I had to choose, you know?
Yeah, I like both of them. I don't really feel like I could compare them either way.
Well, I do know which I like slightly more. I could answer that.
Okay, which one do you like slightly more?
Star Wars. I grew up on Star Wars. Star Wars was my first real fandom, I think. Probably even before Lord of the Rings by a little bit. And that's the one I get more emotional about. I enjoy Star Trek, but I'm emotionally attached to Star Wars and I want it to be good. If a new Star Trek comes out, I'm like, it could be good, or it could be another Enterprise, which I know some people like, but I was not a fan of Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And I can watch the original series, but I think it's a little bit cheesy.
Yep.
Yes, I was one of those people who didn't immediately dislike The Phantom Menace. For one thing, I was kind of young when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was a little bit targeted that. And there I was just so swept away with Star Wars again that I got more Star Wars that I was so excited. In rewatching, I realized that it's not a great movie, but emotionally, I was just so in the moment of getting new Star Wars that I liked it at the time.
I think a lot of people have this experience, The Phantom Menace. I actually would say I am slightly towards Star Trek.
Mm.
And the thing is, I was raised with both equally. But there was something really exciting about getting to watch episodes of Star Trek Voyager as they were coming out because it was released right around the time I was like 6 or 7. So my parents vetted certain episodes and things and would let me watch them. I watched them now, like, oh, some of that stuff went over my head, but I think that was part of their point. And there was just something really special and unique about getting to like watch something that was happening right then. I liked seeing the female captain. I loved the female engineer type.
B'Elanna.
Yeah, I liked B'Elanna, you know.
Voyager is my favorite of the Treks, I will admit. It's kind of corny, but I love
it. So I was like, oh, look, it's someone else who yells at people. And it was cool. Like, you know, they had a lot of different varieties of characters on there. And so I didn't have that in Star Wars. Like, I never really saw anyone there. I mean, honestly, I have nothing against Leia, but she didn't do a whole lot. And she wasn't used a whole lot. And I mean, you could argue it's fantasy, so it's not really based on the intellect of the characters. It's based on the epic scope of things.
Yeah.
But because of that, I just had a hard time really connecting with any of the characters the way I could in Star Trek, especially Star Trek Voyager, when they had all these different characters that, you know, I could more identify with.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I love Voyager. Voyager was my first introduction to Star Trek. I think a lot of it comes down to the age I was introduced because, yeah, it was introduced to. Am I older than you? I have never asked. But yeah, it's because I was probably more like 12 when I remember watching Voyager. But of course, I guess I didn't really start till the last couple seasons. Mm-hmm. So yeah, whereas I was more like 9 or 10 when I started watching Star Wars. So, you know, it's the more formative year.
I watched like both of them really young. Like I watched Star Wars when I was around 6. I watched Star Trek around 6. That was like in the really, really, really early 90s.
When I was probably around 5 or 6, I walked in on my parents watching an episode of Star Trek Generations that scared the heck out of me, and I avoided it intentionally until I was much older. It was the episode where Geordi gets some sort of virus that turns him into some sort of creature. Mm-hmm. It was very scary. There were veins on his skin that you could see, and the veins.
It was so creepy.
It was a very creepy episode. It was not a good introduction to the idea of Star Trek. So
I liked those things. Those were some of my favorite parts of Star Trek. Was the creepy places it went and everything.
My mom did not like to show me creepy things. She was always afraid I would have nightmares. So I didn't have a lot to compare it to, I don't think. So like, I think my kids would not care at all because they've had a lot of like bridging on horror. One of their favorite movies is Coraline. That movie is hecka creepy.
Yeah. I haven't actually watched that one in particular just because of something.
It's awesome. It's actually one of the better book to movie adaptations, which is an episode we should do. We should do book to movie adaptations sometime.
Yep. I think we've completely gone on a tangent here again.
Let's get back.
On to the next question. Let's see.
Weighty one. It's a very, very weighty.
That's a very intense one. Unicorn versus Pegasus.
I know this because My Little Pony has told me that I can choose to Alicorn. Alicorn is an option.
No, I am Team Alicorn too. I refuse to choose between these two fine creatures. I demand a hybrid.
Yeah, though if I have to choose based on which ponies I interact with most, it would be Rainbow Dash as a Pegasus, and I think I'm more Rainbow Dash than I am others.
I have got to like up myself in My Little Pony fandom. I have like no idea about the references here, so I've got to do that sometime when I have like a bunch of emails to answer or something.
Yeah. I need to check up on. That's on my to watch list. Is Friendship is Magic.
But I actually again would veer on the other side because I already actively have Death Unicorn characters. I kind of have to go a little closer to the unicorn side of things. All right. So what's next, Heidi?
Next, we're getting a little bit more into craft and a little bit out of pop culture nonsense. But it's important nonsense. Yes. But this one is multiple POVs versus single point of views.
Oh, wow. That's a really heavy one.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to touch on this and maybe save some of the broader points for its own show because we could probably talk about this for its own episode worth, I'd assume.
Oh, gosh, we totally could.
I've actually written both. I don't want to say I think I've done multiple POVs a little bit more. But I've done single POV enough times that I'm comfortable with it. It really depends on what the story needs for me.
Yeah, I tend to really enjoy multiple POVs because I like to be in different characters' heads. It's very natural for me to hop around and be in their heads, and it actually keeps me interested in the story. But for short stories, that's not really necessary. For novelettes, that's not always necessary. And I'm writing an urban fantasy. And urban fantasy, you can often have just one POV through the whole book. So it just depends.
Yeah, and like I said, I think my favorite books, I'm going through them in my head right now, multiple, single, multiple, single, multiple. Yeah, it's what works for the voice of the story. And that's why it could be a whole craft episode, is because there's a lot of different factors, I think, about what makes it work or doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just, of course, beside personal preference, which is fine too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's see. Oh, we have a bunch of other questions that also kind of went into the future writing craft episode department. Not because we don't think they're relevant. It's actually because we don't think they're very relevant, and we really don't think we can cover them and do them justice in like a little 1 to 5 minute to 7 minute to 10-minute tangent, which happens sometimes when we're both talking. So these questions were KU versus wide. We are definitely going to be tackling that in a future writing craft episode. Then there was tough, unfeely guy character or tough, unfeely girl character. We're going to have a characterization episode in the future. We're very excited about this, but again, that one could easily go another half hour by itself. Let's see, multiple POVs versus single POV, which
we did touch on that, but like I said, we're going to have to go into more depth on that later.
Absolutely. Now, I think there were a couple questions that we did think we could probably address a bit in this, right?
Yeah, our next one was writing fewer longer stories, like full-length novels, versus writing more short stories and novellas and novelettes.
Well, here's the beautiful thing about the idea of a novel versus a short story versus a novelette. People decided they wanted to chop things up into categories. And these categories are more or less random depending on who does it. So I think the science fiction and fantasy writers of America have decided we are an authority. We will chop these up into different sections. You go to other places, they will chop them up into different sections. Different publishing houses, one will call this a novel, someone will call it a novelette, someone will call it a novella. And in fact, The Great Gatsby, which is considered a novel by everyone concerned, is actually square in the novella range. So just to get that out of the way, these are rather entirely arbitrary sections because we needed to do something, so we put things in categories. I think it is really more of a preference. I tend to like to write shorter things just so I can get them out faster. My attention span is not as quite as long as other people's. So I like writing short. I tend to write short when I can. What I often find is that when I try to write short, sometimes it goes long to get myself, or during the editing stage, my editors say, no, you need to add a lot. And so I do, and it ends up longer anyway.
Yeah, I've had a couple projects get out of hand for me in recent years. I think both Spicebrenger and I've griped about it before, The Green Princess, were supposed to be, well, Spicebrenger was supposed to be a full-length novel, but I was thinking more like 60K and ended up more like 90K. Mm-hmm. And I was totally going to make The Green Princess a novella, and it ended up a 80K novel. So I have no control over this. The only times I've ever really had to aim is when I'm like doing a series. I've tried really hard to get the Nissa Glass books all within like a similar range to each other. And I was able to do that with some degree of success. I think The Christmas Story is more of a novelette. It dipped under 20,000 words. I love getting something done, though. It's so nice to be able to finish. I'm really resistant when somebody just wants me to make something longer for the sake of making it longer. Mm-hmm. It's like I get some readers love their big chunky books that are going to take them forever. But even as a reader, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm like, if there's more than 3 books in it, I start getting really nervous before I open that first cover. I'm like, I could die before I finish this.
That being said, if it's someone who I know can reliably come up with cool ideas, then I'll say just keep writing, please, please, please. And I have read a couple of books that have been like 115K, 140K. I just finished with one that I was working on that was 170K. And I swear you couldn't tell. It was the fastest 170,000 words I've ever read in my life. So
I was like, Lord of the Rings is still my favorite novels. Mm-hmm. But it's like,
so it really depends. I'm with you, Heidi. I tend to like try to go short sometimes. If it's a series, I try to keep them all around the same length. But in the end, they kind of do, what they want, and you just kind of have to roll with it. And if you're working with a publisher, then you have to like listen to them a bit more. but even so, it happens. As long as you're writing a good story, I think that's the key. Let's see. Third versus first person. I actually just noticed with this question, they don't have second person in here. I know.
What would fourth person be? Is that a thing?
I know there's omniscient. There's like third person omniscient where it's like very narrative. Terry Pratchett books are like that. And, Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like that. They're very, the narrator has a very strong role in the story. I don't think there's actually a fourth person POV, but now I have to check.
What if we wrote a book in the royal we?
That would be really hilarious. I think it would probably have to be humor.
That would definitely have to be humor.
Let's see. The only place I can find fourth person is an Urban Dictionary. When you make a statement that referring to yourself in the first and third person at the same time.
So in other words, inconsistency.
Well, also it can be used for sarcasm. So like the example they have here is from Merle. And Merle, the person who's talking, says, "I don't think Merle appreciates it when you talk to him." Wow. That's kind of special. Okay. But that's Urban Dictionary, so this is not something I just read out of a grammar book, so please don't go and say, okay, she said this was a thing now. Use that with
Urban Dictionary is not a craft source.
Yeah. I hope you guys realize that. But at the same time, that could be pretty fun to use for comedic effect in your stories, which actually ties into what our theme is going to be for the month of April.
Yes. Well, this is partially to celebrate the launch of our humorous romance anthology, How to Catch a Unicorn and Other Misadventures.
Yay!
Yay! It's going to be so much fun with the cat shifters.
Cat shifters and the snarky unicorns of judgment and the bear princes and
the dragons.
And the real story about alpha wolves.
Oh, yes, the secret inner lives of them. But we will be focusing all in April on different sorts of foolishness. We will touch on comic relief characters and trickster characters, how to use humor in your story, and maybe some of our favorite laugh out loud reads. And I'm hoping we can snag an extra special funny guest for you guys.
Yes. All the snark, all the humor, all the fun. It's April Fool's Day coming up and figured why not? So we are super excited about that. Thank you so much for tuning in to Indie Book Magic this week. Please feel free to throw down reviews on our Facebook page or on iTunes and give us likes on SoundCloud. And for now, this is Janine Ippolito and
H.L. Burke
wishing you a fantastic Easter weekend.